This is Module 12, where we will cover pay items of each for surface variations and lump sum for traffic control protection. Pay items we will cover under each and lump sum are surface variations, where the documentation is to record by station and location and date a list of the variations. And then traffic control price adjustment. Traffic control is paid by the lump sum, and then if there's any differences on the actual job site as far as the value of the work the traffic control standard was protecting, you'll have to do an adjustment. So you'll need to document the calculations done for these adjustments. Here we have the rolling 16-foot straight edge. And we notice that there's some bolts here. These are adjusted to indicate the height of the bump to be detected. If it's a mainline pavement, it's 3/16 of an inch, looking for that type of bump to scratch. If it's some surface other than a ramp over 40 miles per hour or mainline pavement, the requirement is 3/8 of an inch. This is rolled behind the paving train. Hopefully the mat is still warm enough that if a scratch is indicating a bump, the roller can come back and roll out that bump, or at least an opportunity to roll it out. Here we see the straight edge being rolled behind the final roller. It is done in each wheel path independently. So once this check is complete, the operator may have an opportunity to come back and attempt to roll out some of the bumps. And then it'll have to be rechecked as a final check for specification. Let's go to the specification book in Article 406.11. Here you see we have an excerpt of that article. You'll see that we have two categories of surface. A surface that has been reprofiled, and by reprofiling we mean milling, and then a surface not profiled, which would be bare concrete, or it could be a fold-up asphalt, but it has not been milled when you place the overlay on top of it. So in the case of a surface that has been milled or reprofiled, doesn't matter how thick of an overlay you're placing on top of it, the deduction is going to be in tons, 2 tons for the calculation. If you're placing an overlay on top of the existing surface, where it's concrete or asphalt, you're going to look at the combination of binder and surface course thickness. If that thickness is over 2 3/4 inches, you're going to deduct 2 tons of the surface course cost. If it's less than 2 3/4, you're going to deduct 1 ton of the surface course bid price. And then for any bumps greater than 3/4 of an inch, you're going to do a removal and replacement. So to cover the course of action in doing this test, each wheel path in each lane is tested for smoothness with that 16-foot straight edge, according to 406.11. The bolts are set for 3/16 of an inch for mainline pavement, and also for ramps that are over 40 mph. All other areas get a 3/8 of an inch check. So then you roll on the straight edge and you get scratches on the surface, and that's what you count for your surface variations. Let's go to page F50 of the documentation guide. And here you'll see an example of a field book to collect the surface variation data. What we have is the lane, and then the wheel path. So in this case, we're going eastbound in both cases, and then we're going the left wheel path and the right wheel path. It would also be a good idea to write down the surface variation bump that we're detecting, 3/16 of an inch in this case, and then the various stations where bumps were detected are recorded and added up. It's always a good idea to record the cost of your variations as far as the deductions will go. Here's 1 ton as it was bid. This material is bid as $73.43 per ton. So that would be 1 ton deduction, and then the 2 ton deduction would be twice that. So that's recorded here. And it's a simple matter of counting up your variations, 14 in this case, times 2 tons, because it was reprofiled, and get your total deduction. Then you will have to do an authorization with a negative unit price and then a quantity of 14 that will result in the negative addition as an authorization. Let's go to workbook page 15, and we have a surface variation problem. Please read through this, and then we will talk about the solution on the other side. Let's review this problem a little bit. It's always good to underline the key elements of a problem. In this case, you're working on a 2-lane milling, so you have milling involved, which is reprofiling, so that's important. You have the length of the project, which in the case of deducts is not important. The contractor bid $87 per ton, so that's going to be our key number in determining the deduction amount for the surface mix. And in the plan, we're going to mill 1.5 inches, and he placed an 1.5 inch binder and an 1.5 inch surface, which is 3 inches. But the controlling factor here is that it's been milled. So it's a reprofiling job. So that ties into 2 tons of mix. Upon the completion of work, you got 17 surface variations. So then the question is, how much money will be deducted from the contract for these surface variations? If you go to your workbook, page 32, you'll see the solution. Again, go to Article 406.11 if you haven't already and review the specification. It's being milled, so that means it's considered reprofiled, so we're in that grouping. And then per the chart, we're going to deduct 2 tons of mix for each variation in the surface. For each scratch we have in the surface, we're going to deduct the equivalent cost of 2 tons of mix. So we need to calculate what our 87 per ton bid value is times the 2 tons, and then times the 17 variations. And that gives us just under $3,000, $2,958 for a deduction value. Here's a case where we have a number of scratches in a short distance. Apparently there's some chatter in the roadway. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or so scratches in a very short period. This is indication that we got a little bit of a problem in the rolling or the paver in this area. If possible, come back and roll out this area, see if you can get that chatter out, and then retest it. If not, then you're going to have to do a judgment call of what you want to deduct in this case. So let's go to page F51 of the dot guide. Here we see an example of the traffic control protection quantity sheet. So here we have the basic information on the traffic control pay item. Planned quantity, of course, is 1. That's a lump sum. And the bid price, $28,000 for this particular traffic control standard. The contractor made out a project schedule and determined that the standard for this lump sum item would be in place for 9 months. And if you recall the way we pay for traffic control protection, there's a setup fee of 25% that we'll pay up front once it's set up properly. And then we'll prorate 65% over time, and then the final removal is 10% once it's removed and pumped back as it should be. In this case, the removal happened a little bit sooner than the project schedule would indicate, so it's 0.22 rather than 10%. So the final payment adds up to the one whole lump sum. Now there is the possibility of an adjustment based upon the work protected by this standard. So we see we have a note here that this check was made of the total value of the work items that the traffic standard protected. And it turns out that the work had some cost increase by 10%. So there's a calculation and check for that adjustment. So let's take a look at the adjustment procedure, which is located in Article 701.2 of the spec book, which is page 602. This calculation is performed when the work increases or decreases more than 10% from the bid. If we look at the formula here, we have the 0.25 times the bid price, which is per specification. If you remember, we pay for the setup as 25% or 0.25 of the lump sum is paid up front as a factor for just setting up the traffic control. And then we have the length of time it's in place is 0.65, and then a final 10% or 0.1 for the removal. So the 0.65 plus the 0.1 gives you the 0.75. And this is the portion that we will perform the adjustment on. And we'll go through a little formula here to come up with the adjustment. The X is critical in that adjustment. And you'll notice we're going to subtract off a tenth of whatever the value of X we determine is. And it's basically that the error in bidding and estimating for the contractor and their risk is basically 10% of what they provided. So that's withdrawn in the calculation. So P is the as bid unit price for the standard. So in this case, if you remember, it was 28,000. But then we're going to look at the items of work, and that's the key here, the items of work that the standard protected. So there was a amount of work in the original bid. It could have been different types of patching, joint sealing, so on, that the standard protected. Then you actually perform the work, now you have the actual value. So you no longer have the estimate, you have the actual value to work. And then we're going to divide that by the original bid, or the original value. So that becomes our X. Now what's key in this calculation is this symbol here on both sides. That means absolute value. So this number will come out either a negative or a positive. When we say absolute value, we only take the positive number of it. So we get rid of the negative sign if that's what this is. We do need to make a little note though, to where this is going to increase or decrease our bid based upon this value. Once we stick it in this part of the equation, you'll recognize it's going to increase or decrease our value. So if we're adding work higher than the original bid, it should increase it. If it's reducing the amount of work, there was work removed from the original bid, we want to decrease it. So that's why there's a plus or minus. You're going to have to choose one of those based upon which way the work had progressed. Now, if in calculating the X value is less than 1/10 for point 1, we are not going to do an adjustment. It's going to be 0, and then no adjustment takes place. So let's go to page F52 in the doc guide, and hopefully this will make the exercise a little more clear. So here we have a number of patching items, saw cuts, subgrade repair, tie bars, and so on. This is all the work items that were being protected by the traffic standard. And of course we had a unit price on the bid, a planned quantity, so we have a planned cost for these particular items. Now notice here we have one that's a 0. There was no planned quantity for subgrade repair. So if you have any work being performed under 10904, extra work, you need to add that in if it was behind the protection in this effort. So again, here's the planned cost. Get a total on that. Then we have our final cost, and you notice that quite a bit of our patching increased. And one type of patch was eliminated in this case. The subgrade repair that was not in the plan was added in, and then adds up to this value. So if you remember our X values in the formula, we have our final cost, the 118 is here, minus the planned cost, this column, and divided by the planned cost. So that was just a little bit over 10%. So we do proceed with the adjustment. The bid for the traffic protection was $28,000. We determine our X factor, go through the formula, and you'll notice the adjustment is fairly minor in this case. So instead of being 28,000, it's 28,161.36. So that's our adjusted bid price for this work. And we will have to do an adjustment by adding in a new pay item, a XXX number, for adjusting the traffic control protection at a positive 161.36. If this work resulted in a smaller number, we would actually have a negative number and have to claw back a part of this value. So let's go to page F53 of the doc guide. And here we have the quantity sheet for traffic control. And it's showing that we have a addition of a price adjustment for our traffic control standard. So on this date, we calculated the adjustment. So we're going to have one, it's going to be a lump sum of 1. That's going to be our final, on our final payment. And we have our spreadsheet or field book for the calculation. So we just reference that. So this adds the quantity of an adjustment to the project. If it was less than the 10%, we would not do this. But since it's over 10%, we have to add the adjustment to the project. And that's what this exercise does. Let's go to our workbook, page 16, and we'll take a look at our problem on traffic control price adjustment. Some key things here. We did have a traffic control standard 701-411 that protected an amount of work. That amount of work was looked at as far as the original contract value, which is this value, performed a project, and then added up the final value of all the work completed behind the standard, which is this. And then we have the bid price for the traffic control protection. So our question is, what is the adjusted unit price for traffic control? So let's work on that a little bit. And then also determine the pay item number for the additional adjustment. So let's review the answer of this workbook problem. It's on page 33. We just make a general note that there was a calculation file and reference that for the standard of the work amounts that were done. They were given to you, so here they are. The awarded value, the final value, and the bid price for the traffic control protection. So if you remember our X in our calculation, we got to take the final value, subtract off the awarded value, and divide by the awarded value, and that gives us an increase. It's greater than 10% or 0.1, so we proceed. Also note that the final value is higher than the awarded value, so we know we're going to do an addition or an increase. So let's do our adjustment. Remember our 0.25 for setting up, that stays the same. Then we have the remainder 0.75 times our factor, the 0.16 minus 0.1 as in the formula, plus or minus. In this case, it's going to be a plus. So that's what's here. Let's crank all this through. We end up with $28,737.50 as compared to $727,500. Not much of an increase, but an increase. So $1,237.50 is our increase, and that will have to be added to the project as an adjustment. So we'll have to add the quantity of one contract price adjustment for traffic control, and then that lump sum for that adjustment is going to be the $1,237.5. We found the pay item number, which if you go to the construction memorandum 17-4, which starts on page 94 of the appendix, this is on contract changes. And if you go to the back of that memorandum, which is on page 114, you'll see there's a list of specialty pay items that are XXX numbers for adjustments. So on page 114, if you go down just to the third line, you'll see XXX 03100, which is the traffic control price adjustment per contract specification. You're going to adjust your quantity to be one, so it's one each or one lump sum, and then this is the value of that lump sum. So that is your adjustment, a positive value of $1,237.50. Let's do another problem. This is workbook page 17. Again, same traffic control setup, same original bid. However, this time the final value is reduced. There was some work eliminated, so we have a lower value, and then we had the same bid price. So that we got the same questions. What is the unit price adjustment for traffic control? For the answer to our problem, let's go to workbook page 33. Again, we're going to reference a note to where the calculations can be found. They were given to us in this example. So we have an award value, our final value, which is less than the award, and then our bid price for our traffic control protection. So let's crank through our X value. In this case, we have that lower value subtracting off the bid divided by the bid value. In this case, it's a negative 0.16 decrease. So it's a decrease. So we're going to put in our absolute value, which is the 0.16. Then we're going to subtract off our tenth per the formula. And we know this is a decrease, so we're going to subtract in this case. So this is where our subtraction sign goes. We do not use this subtraction. We perform this function and then subtract it here. Crank through the rest of our equation. In this case, we got 0.94 times. And when we get said and done, we're $26,262.5. So we got $1,237.5 decrease this time. Again, our XXX number is 03100 for the price adjustment for traffic control, and a negative 1,237.50 for a quantity of 1.